Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to turn to comedian and Glaswegian Frankie Boyle. Frankie, welcome to the Keiser Report.
Thanks for having me, Max.
All right, Frankie Boyle, George Osborne has been up in Scotland warning against independence. What the heck is the story with Scottish independence anyway, and what are your thoughts on it?
George Osborne, man, every time I hear his voice, I just feel like I should gather my belongings and get off the land. Just like he's going to come and seize my sheep or something
He
like
has
that.
a face like he's perpetually caught in a state of panic. He doesn't instill a lot of confidence, does he?
He's just a chancer, isn't he? He's just like maybe his PR is like a time-travelling sheriff of Nottingham or something. Because clearly someone is telling him, could you not sneer in public? And he can't quite bring himself to do that.
But he's like warning Scotland, though. He's saying, you don't go independent. You'll die. You'll fall into the ocean. You won't get the British pound. He's really warning them, like, how you'll never survive. I mean, the Scottish people, wouldn't they take that umbrage at this and say, to hell with you, Osborne?
Scottish people don't care if it's a British pound, providing it's heavy enough to throw at a referee. They just couldn't care less. I think it's scaremongering, isn't it? I mean, there's lots of things with Scottish independence, and you think the case hasn't really been put properly yet. But if you look at our maritime border with England, that's quite interesting. England owns oil fields that are north of Dundee. It's basically a huge zigzag line heading towards like Norway or somewhere. So there's lots of ways that Scotland could survive economically, but obviously his job is just to beat the drum for fearmongering.
Yeah, sure. They've got the oil, and oil is really the secret, quote-unquote, behind Margaret Thatcher. Without the North Sea oil, there would not have been the Thatcher Revolution as we know it. Thatcher, of course, Tory. Your thoughts in terms of Scotland's independence? You could get away from the Tories.
Well, that's a huge selling point of it. I think if they could put it to people like that Scotland could be the independent socialist country that it feels it is in its heart. If they got away, that would be a huge selling point for them. But they haven't really chosen to put that case there, because obviously the people at the heart of the independence campaign and the SNP and so on aren't socialists. Yeah,
I mean, even in America, the people in Alaska get a cut of the oil revenues. The people in the Middle East get a cut of the oil revenues. If Scotland were independent, all the Glaswegians and everyone in Scotland would get a cut of the oil revenues. It would be a socialist paradise.
It would be a socialist paradise. But you got sort of. You got George Osborne there, haven't you? I don't know why Osborne denied taking cocaine, right? So clearly he's never taken cocaine, as he says. But I mean, if he had, it would explain his personality. If he was constantly on coke, just the sheer horror of his personal bearing. He should just go for it. It's just say he should snorts it every day with the deeds to Hertfordshire or whatever he does.
Well, he has the habit of a cocaine user or an ex-cocaine user where they're always looking for that bindle. Where do they put that bindle? What pocket is it in? You see that in the City of London a lot. Bankers kind of checking where they put their coke.
Right.
Yeah, even when they're not doing the coke. Now, the Scottish banks, very famous, RBS and HBOS, epic financial fraud zones, but they're now owned by British taxpayers. Isn't this a good time as any to leave English with the bad banks? You see what I'm saying? Like, another benefit of going independent is just leave all the Scottish debt in England and you walk away without that debt.
Yeah, because actually the reason Scotland joined with England was because of debt in the first place. Do you know that? The Darien Project and all that stuff?
No, tell us.
The Darien Project was basically Scotland thought they would get in on colonialism, and they decided that they would have a colonial empire out by Panama, and they invested a lot of money in that, the nobles at the time, and they lost all their money because everybody died from yellow fever, and that's why they had to do the Act of Union with England. And the spy in Scotland who was seeing just how broke the nobles were and if they would go for this was Defoe, who wrote Robinson Crusoe. He was an English spy.
Right.
So we're founded on debt. The whole union's founded on debt.
And a lot of this debt was built up during those Thatcher years, even though they had a lot of North Sea oil behind them. It's not like Norway, where they built up this huge, almost $1 trillion worth of a reserve fund for the country. They just blew it all here on housing speculation. Osborne's got a new project now where he's going to mimic the subprime disaster of America. He's going to bring that to the UK now, where the government's going to subsidize speculation in the housing area. It's clearly a Ponzi scheme. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole thing, if there'd been a shortage of affordable housing and them saying, well, we're going to bring back a right-to-buy scheme that caused the shortage of affordable housing, and Cameron's, what was Cameron's thing, so that everybody can share the dreams of homeowners? Is that the dreams of eating tissue paper to survive, or the dreams of being trapped in a loveless marriage by negative equity? It doesn't really say. But yeah, it seems like a huge Ponzi scheme.
Is it psychosis, or are they just stupid?
They're not in charge. I think that's the thing.
Who's in charge?
Banks. I think the finance sector is in charge, you know? And if you look at our politicians, do they look like they could be in charge of something? Like, we're beside Boris Johnson's office here. Does he look like he could lead? He couldn't lead you into a revolving door. He's a bouncy castle with Alzheimer's. He's not exercising power over anybody. It's a sham. They're the front of a three-card Monte.
Let's talk about the media in this country, which of course that means the BBC, because the BBC is the media in this country. Yeah. And you've had your run into the BBC.
Sure.
I'm not sure if you've been,
and everybody.
Have you been banned currently, or you're not banned, or are banned, or?
I think I'm effectively banned.
You're in the penalty box.
Yeah.
For the moment.
Yeah.
Okay. And I was on the 10 o'clock news. The 10 o'clock live show a couple of years ago, talking about, I was saying, hang the bankers.
Yeah.
And one of the Lovies comics, David Mitchell, was aghast that anyone would make the suggestion. And there was a huge brouhaha, and they were really trying to defend the bankers, even though the Goldman Sachs banker at the table said, well, yeah, maybe we should hang the bankers. Why are comedians who would be, you would think, on the cutting edge of satire and really pointing the finger where it needs to be pointed, so reticent about attacking the bankers, yourself excluded, of course?
Well, I think it's the ones that are, I mean, David Mitchell was brilliant, but there's a certain thing of the people who are allowed on television becomes a narrower spectrum during times of crisis. So comedians talk about this. They say in times of austerity, you'll find that like happier comedians do better. You know, Michael McIntyre, people like that, because people want to forget about stuff, and that's true. But also, more challenging people start to go out at the edges. They start to not appear on TV because you need a really stupid population. You can't rip people off like this with people who have any information. So you don't just need a stupid population. You need you need people, 50 million people a week watching a dancing dog. I mean, that's what you need. People just, you know, if you're going to get away with this.
Is that a nice way to talk about Sir Forsyth?
Is he still alive when this goes out? When do you go out? Friday?
Freddy's Forsyth. He's a dancing dog, a dancing poodle to distract the population. Is that a nice thing to say, Frankie?
That would be a lot better.
Now, you have a visitor in Scotland, of course. Donald Trump has shown up with a golf course.
Yeah,
He's a nice American, low-key American.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Well, that just shows you how unprogressive the SNP are, that they called back his horrible golf course, and of course it creates jobs for people in Scotland, jobs creating, you know, whatever, off businessmen and changing their sheets.
Yeah. Let's get back to the media discussion for a second. So you're saying, Frankie, that the comics who are looking to really go after these bankers are going off the mainstream channels, off the major markets. They're appearing more. I mean, I go to, for example, in London, there are now a couple of showcases. One's called Lolitics, which is in Camden once a month, which is mostly political comedy. Yeah. And of course, that comedy goes in cycles. Yeah. You're one of the top talents in the UK, in the world, I would say. Give me your insight into this. You know, we went through the 60s where you had a lot of political comedy and political-oriented music. Then we went through the Reagan era, which was pop and Madonna. Sure. Are we getting back? And then we had the punk rock phase. Not a lot of punk comedians, although maybe in this country there were. Where are we historically on the culture cycle? Frankie Boyle, your thoughts?
Well, you're in a point where it's been held down into what it would probably come back up into a cycle of rebellion again, is kind of been held down because they need people to be saying as little as possible at the minute because of all the various massive frauds that are going on. So you can't really have people talking about that. I mean, even when I started out doing panel shows, we were talking about the Iraq War during the invasion of Iraq. You can't imagine that now. You can't imagine that a panel show would be on that and they weren't leading on, you know, sports.
So is it getting worse at the moment?
Well, it's getting worse, but you've got to remember there's the literal meaning of things and there's like the doctrinal meaning of things. You know, this thing Chomsky talks about a lot, where he says, so like political comedy literally to us means, you know, Bill Hicks, George Carlin, people talking about politics. But doctrinally, political comedy means satire in Britain. It means people having a bit of a go at the coalition, saying that there shouldn't really be cuts, not talking about things like war or Gaza or any huge kind of political touchstones. You know, so there's a doctrinal don't talk about that. That's accepted by most people if you want to get on a TV.
Yeah, because there's a stranglehold in media with the BBC. So how come there's so little media diversity? In the print page, there's different print, left-oriented print newspapers, somewhat, compared to the U.S. But a lot of people here would say that doesn't exist. That the Guardian is just very, just a little bit less to the right than, let's say, the Telegraph. Sure. But compared to the U.S., there is kind of this left wing. But on TV, however, it's all right wing. There's no left at all on TV because it's all dominated by the BBC. And I was just reading a documentary about BBC. In fact, hides taxes through the Netherlands, just like Starbucks and Google and all these other companies. So they're just a corporate slime bucket as well. Your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've got a situation really where if you look at certain things being reported by the BBC, so if you look at something like Israel-Palestine or something, you can see a great deal of what would seem to be institutional bias there. And it's a great institution in some other ways. I mean, compared to television in America, I think it offers a lot more than you can get in any commercial channel in America. But at the same time, you've got to recognise the role it plays in Britain in propaganda.
Well, when we were doing a show for BBC World News called The Article with Max Keiser a couple of years ago, we only had one editorial direction, and that is we could not mention Israel in any context.
Right, sure.
That's the only thing we heard from the BBC.
Well, I mean, you've got to remember though that it's kind of like a warring federation in there, and there are people who would want to do that joke about Israel, and some of them might be working on your show, but what they're vulnerable to is kind of lobbying about, and they're very vulnerable to the press. And you've got to understand the role of the printed press here in that. What they're scared of is, if you think about the Jonathan Ross, Russell Brand scandal a few years ago.
Yeah, fill the people in here. This is the phone answering machine.
Yeah, this is a huge scandal in Britain where it was about nothing, essentially. It was about, on a radio show, two really famous people here did a prank call to a kind of well-loved actor and said some stuff they shouldn't have done. But that is still a bigger scandal than the current paedophilia scandal in the BBC. It's still,
the Jimmy Savile scandal.
Yeah, if you were to look at column inches, I bet it's still a bigger scandal.
Right, so Russell Brand left a message on a phone answering machine where he made fun of a guy and used a very spicy language. Yeah. That became a huge scandal, and BBC was censored, and it was covered. But the Jimmy Savile scandal, where he's involved in over, I think, 400 cases of child pedophilia, this kind of is swept under the rug.
Sure, I mean, and that's what they're scared of. If you're talking about why they're scared editorially, they're scared of newspapers that can come out every day with big guns and they could just put you on the front page every day until, your Director General has to resign. That's what they're really scared of. There's a lot of good people in there,
Well, this Thatcher funeral, of course, big virtual state funeral.
It was a state funeral, yeah.
And she was, I believe, gave Jimmy Savile a knighthood.
Yeah, what was going on there? We don't know. They should have, a fitting funeral for her would have been to just plug her orifices, leave her in the sun for a few days, pull out her arse cork and let her go whizzing down Westminster like a deflating balloon. Like, people couldn't have been less interested.
With a big ad for Starbucks.
Yeah,
because of course she's all about market forces.
Yeah, exactly.
It would have been beautiful.
Should have loved it.
On pay-per-view, could have been profitable.
Yeah.
It should have been a profit on the funeral. They shouldn't have had a loss on the funeral. Margaret Thatcher's rolling in her grave, but they took a loss on her funeral. They could have made a killing on that funeral.
Her political guest list at the funeral was just a damning indictment of the shambles that was the IRA. They should have got all of those guys.
Well, I often make that allusion myself. And my director usually, I'm glad somebody mentioned
Osborne
this.
was crying at the funeral, wasn't he? It was like a thing from Star Trek or something. He was just couldn't believe it. It was like a tear forming in the burning eye of Sauron.
And all these shots of Michael Portillo.
Yeah,
what's that all about?
It was bizarre, wasn't it? And to think that they went so large on it in such a time of supposed austerity, it's disgusting.
All right, well, we're way out over time, but Frankie Boyle, thanks so much for being
thanks for
on the
having me,
Keiser Report.
Cheers, man.
All right. Okay, and that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacey Herbert. I want to thank my guest, Frankie Boyle. If you'd like to send me an email, please do so at keiserreport@rttv.ru. Until next time, Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.